Good morning, good to be with you. Thank you for your attention this weekend. Thank you for your interest in this topic. Had some good comments in between that I'm going to be incorporating in. If you were not here for this morning's lesson, I'm just going to skip real quick through the slides. We're talking about parenting pitfalls we want to avoid, easy mistakes to make, some very fundamental, some just easy to slip in. Mistake number one, failing to discipline. He who spares his rod hates his son. He who loves him disciplines him diligently. The rod and reproof bring wisdom. A child who gets his own way brings shame to his mother. Correct your son, he'll give you comfort, he will delight your soul. Mistake number two, rewarding misbehavior. A child throws a tantrum or some other type of misbehavior to get what they want, and the parent gives them what they want, you've just guaranteed more misbehavior. Don't do that. The rod and reproof bring wisdom. A child who gets his own way brings shame to his mother, Proverbs 29. Number three, the mistake of expecting misbehavior. That's where you let your 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, etc., 9, 10, 11, 12, you just kind of give up and you think, oh, this one's going to act like that. Well, they're acting like that. It's our job to train them. And don't expect child number 2 to be exactly like child number 1. Train each child. That's our job. And then number 4, failing to be consistent. It's to be done diligently. And we gave the illustration of don't do that. I said don't do that. I'm telling you don't do that. I really mean it. Don't do that. Don't make me count to 10. Just skip all that business and have them obey the first time. Thinking I don't have time. It's like saying I don't have time to get rid of lice. Hebrews, all discipline for the moment seems not joyful but sorrowful, yet afterward yields peaceful fruit. Next, we're going to talk about failing to control self. But before I forget it, I want to make a couple of comments. One brother pointed out, sometimes, especially when they're little, what they need is some sleep. That's right. A baby crying should not be equated with a baby misbehaving. Sometimes babies are misbehaving when they're crying, but a lot of times that's how a baby communicates. A baby can't say, I'm uncomfortable, I need a diaper change, I'm hungry, I'm injured. They can't use those words. The only way they have is early on to communicate is crying. Now, what do you realize as a parent? Oh, and by the way, moms, dads, sometimes when doing lessons on this topic, parents are really, I hope my child doesn't make noise. I would so much rather be in a church where I hear some babies making some noise than be in a church where there's no babies to make noise. When they cry, we learn different cries. You know the scared cry, you know the injured cry, or the uncomfortable or hungry cry, or the tired cry. You also learn the defiant, demanding their own way cry, and the whining cry. Yeah, those last two, those are the two not to put up with. But the other ones, that's part of how a baby communicates. So just keep that in mind. Now, when a baby's tired, sometimes they just need some sleep. Now, if they're tired and they're headbutting you and stuff like that, that's going to need a swat and then get them to sleep. But sometimes they just need to sleep. Mistake number 6, failing to control self. What's the proper motivation? God didn't give us children so that we can vent our frustrations on them. God gave us children to discipline and train because we love them. Look at the motivation. He who loves him disciplines him diligently. There's a big difference between that biblical discipline and child abuse. Unfortunately, we live in a world now where a lot of people have been trained to think, oh, if you give a child a spanking or a swat, oh, that's child abuse. No, it's not. That's child training. When it's calm, patient, kind, and firm correction, that's what children need. But you and I know, and we see sometimes horrible stories in the news about children that have just been treated horribly, and those parents end up in jail, and they should be in jail. But there's another kind of child abuse I want you to think about. There was an expert. I was watching a program one time. It was a talk show audience. There was a male host and a female host, the coffee table, the audience, and they would bring on guests. And they brought on a child expert. And he's up there and he's talking about how he's against spanking. You never do that at all. And the female host is a mom who had a 2-year-old, and she said, well, like if my child's about to touch a knife or something sharp, I'll take their hand and I'll go, no, no. And the expert goes, and it's important to know that that's wrong. And it proceeded to some audience questions, and a lady in the back said, my problem is I'm yelling and screaming at my kids. The expert laughed it off. Oh, don't worry about that. I yell and scream at my kids too. Yeah. I grew up in a home where I got a lot of spankings. I had an older brother, I had a younger brother. It was often, we were not treating each other right, getting in a fight, getting in an argument, whatever. And it's like, all right, boys. And mom would say, go out and get a switch. And we'd have to go out in the yard, get a switch, and we would each get our switch. And I am thankful that I had a mom and a dad that loved me enough to train me. I am glad I didn't grow up in a home where I was getting yelled at and screamed at. I got my spanking that I deserved, and she was not yelling at me. She was not screaming at me. I knew I deserved it. She knew it. I got it, and I learned from it. What would you rather grow up in? That or a house where you're being yelled and screamed at? But you look at the philosophy of the expert. He thinks you can't go no, no. So is it much of a surprise that he ends up yelling and screaming at his kids? Don't do that. Also, don't do this. Maybe you've had several children and this one's really difficult. And you're saying, why won't he obey? What's wrong with you? I don't know why you won't do right. What has that child just heard? That child has just heard, you're defective, and we adults don't know what's the problem. You tell me how that's going to motivate a child to do good. Don't do that. Is parenting sometimes frustrating? Yeah. You know what? Sometimes their misbehavior is pretty funny. You ever had this happen? Little ones are doing something, and it's bad, but it's really funny, and you're having to cover your mouth while you're saying it because you're smiling so much. And you say, okay, Jaden, let's talk. Just because we see it's funny doesn't mean that the child needs to know it's funny. And just because we're frustrated doesn't mean we're to take the frustration out on the child. Sometimes we might realize I'm really angry right now, and we might say, I want you to sit there in that chair for a few minutes, and I'm going to be back, and we're going to talk about what you did, and give yourself a chance to calm down. And I have sometimes disciplined my kids. I remember one of mine, the one that got the most spankings, sometimes he could tell I was angry, and he said, Dad, you did that because you were angry, or it said, you seemed, and it's like, it's not as effective when he knows what he did wrong, and he knows I love him. And I didn't sometimes do this with him before. I did it a number of times with him, but my normal routine was this. When they were little, it's like they've disobeyed mom. Oh no, what did mommy say to you to do? They go, Mommy said do it. I said, And what did you do? I didn't do it. I said, so what do you get? What do you got to get? I got to get a spanking. I said, that's right. I said, does Daddy love you? Is Daddy mad at you? But you got to get a spanking because God gave me a job to teach you to do right. And this is just my personal way of doing it. You don't have to sit in scripture, but if it's helpful to you, I would involve them in it. I'd give them some choice. Like if it deserved a swat on the hand, sometimes it need to be more powerful back here. But if it was just swat on the hand with a little one, I'd say, okay, which hand do you want it? Get it on. And I'm just involving them in it. And then they get their swat. Or sometimes I give them choice. You want to go say you're sorry first? You want to get your spanking first? Spanking first. Okay, so they get their spanking, or if they're older and needs more, get their spanking. Now go tell Mom you're sorry. And then they go, and then they get their hug. That's effective. But with one of mine sometimes, because he got so many more spankings than the other ones, sometimes I wouldn't go through all of that. And I'd be aggravated and frustrated, and he could tell the difference. And it's not as effective. Control self. Here's something to keep in mind. This is the vase test. For this case, I want you to imagine that you've got a vase in your house, and it was your great-grandmother's vase, and it's kind of your prized possession. And you went to Antiques Roadshow or whatever, and it's a $5,000 vase, okay? You love that vase. Now, in this scenario, we're going to assume that you don't already have a rule in your house about throwing a ball in the house. By the way, it's more important that you enforce the rules that you have than how many rules you have. We had a room in our house where we played football in the house. It was a big room. And we played football over the furniture and stuff. You don't have to do that in your house. But a house with 5 rules that are followed is better than a house with 322 rules that are not followed. In the home for this illustration, we're going to assume there was not already a rule about throwing the ball in the house because it hadn't happened before. There's the vase. Jaden comes in, and no offense to any Jadens out here. Jaden comes in, he takes the ball, and he throws it off the wall, and he catches it. Mom sees Jaden doing that, doesn't want anything broken, and she says, Jaden, don't throw the ball in the house. Jaden looks right at Mom, you know he heard you, takes the ball, throws it. What do you do? I want you to consider 2 scenarios with a typical mom. This is not the right way to do it. Typical mom. He looks at her, throws the ball anyway. Scenario A, nothing got broken. What does Mom do? Too many moms do what? Jaden, I said don't throw the ball. Jaden, I want you to stop throwing that ball. Jaden, don't make me tell you again. And it goes on until she starts raising her voice, and she's either start yelling and screaming, he decides, okay, I better stop, or he gets a whipping because Mom's mad. Scenario B, same mom. She says one time, Jaden, don't throw the ball in the house. Ball ricochets. Great-grandma's vase is shattered into hundreds of pieces. Does Mom go, Jaden, I asked you not to throw the ball? No. What's Mom doing? Mom's going ballistic on Jaden. She's screaming at Jaden. She's snagging him up. She's whipping him. Why? Is she disciplining him because she loves him? No, she's not. She's getting revenge on him because her vase got broken. You know what Mom should have done? She should have recognized something was wrong the first time. When she said, Jaden, don't throw that ball in the house, and he looked at her and he threw it, everything else should have stopped. Because something in that room was broken and it was more valuable than that vase. And that was her son's attitude. He defied her, he was rebellious, and he deliberately disobeyed her. Whatever she's doing, say, she's on the phone, Mom, I have to go, I have to deal with something. And she should have gone over and she should have talked to him. There should have been reproof. There should have been punishment. And it should have been firm enough that he understands not to do that again. Because she loves him. Which is more valuable, the vase or Jaden? Her little Jaden is a lot more valuable than that vase. Calm, consistent, and in control. That's effective. Mistake number 7, settling for situation control instead of training the child. Settling for situation control instead of training the child. What do we mean by that? Sometimes parents are just trying to quell things instead of training the child. So I'm going to give you an example, and it involves, these are my first 3 kids. This is over in Czechoslovakia. When the Berlin Wall came down, we moved to Prague and helped plant the work there in Prague, Czechoslovakia, after the Russians were still there, actually, the first time. This is a shot from one time when we were there in Czechoslovakia. That's April in the back, Adam in the middle, and that's Brianne in the front. The story I'm about to tell you is about Brianne when she's not much older than this right here. And she was easy. She was, one person knew her when she was a baby, she just called her Smiley, because she was just a happy little girl and smiling, and she was easy. I've had some kids that were stubborn. She wasn't, generally speaking. And I hardly ever needed to spank her. If she saw me disapprove, that was often sometimes enough. And occasionally she might get a spanking. Bertina had to spank her more, but I usually didn't need to. She was a good little girl. Still is, except now she's a big girl raising some good little girls. She just had another baby on Monday. But one day, and out of the 6 kids, I had 3 that did this. I had 3 that just decided one day they were not going to obey. And here's how it went with Brianne. We got in the car, and at the time, she was in laws change. At the time, she was good for a booster seat. And she was supposed to get in the booster seat and just close it. That was her job. We got in the car, and I'm putting it in reverse and backing up. And I hear from April, she said, Dad, Brianne didn't get in her booster seat. And I'm like, Brianne, get in your seat. And this was the day Brianne just decided she wasn't going to. And she didn't obey. That's Brianne. Some of the other ones might not have been a surprise. It was a surprise for Brianne. Okay. So I pull off by a little creek. And I stop the car, and I get out, and me and Brianne get out, and we have a talk, the reproof. I remind her of my job and that she has to get in that booster seat, etc. And I get a switch, and I gave her a switch. And she cried, but not as much kind of as I might have expected. And I said, now get in the car seat. She got in the car and she sat down beside the car seat. I brought her back out. We had another talk. She got another spanking. I said, Brianne, get in the car seat. Please this time get in the car seat. She got in the car, she sat down beside the car seat. I brought her out, had another lecture, had a harder spanking. She sat down beside the car seat. Brought her back out, had another lecture, another spanking. She sat down beside the car seat. It was the 5th time before she finally sat in the car seat. Now, what would have been easier for me? She was like 3 years old. I could have just put her in the car seat. What would that not have, would that have gotten her in the car seat? Yes. That would have been controlling the situation. I'm not as concerned about the situation as I am my daughter. It's not that big. Now, please, yeah, put your kids in car seats. But understand, I'm from a different generation. We didn't have car seats. Okay, my first memory is driving down the road and I'm standing in front of the dashboard and looking out over the thing. I know what the year, because it was my dad's 59 Plymouth, because they had the rear view mirror right here instead of up here, you know, and I'm just looking out like that. Don't drive like that. But my point is, my real concern here was not thinking we were going to have an accident. She's defying and disobeying, and she needed to learn. If I would have put her in the car seat, she would have been in the car seat, but what would not have happened? The day she decided, I'm going to defy Dad and disobey him, she wouldn't have had to submit her will and obey. So I was relating this one time in Maryland, and 2 or 3 days later, one of the moms came back and said, that was a life-altering experience for me. She said, before this, when my daughter was acting bad, I would just put her in the high chair, and I would just put her there. She might still be defiant and screaming stuff, she would just do it. She said she switched it and she started doing this, and after just 2 or 3 days, she said, my daughter is happier and she's obeying. Huge difference. Mere control versus training. What results? Have you ever heard a fella say this? Well, I told my boys they're never going to do that under my roof. That is a really shallow level of training. If all I do, you're not going to do that under my roof, then where are they going to do it? Well, they're probably going to do it under my roof, but if they're not going to do it under my roof, they're going to find another roof to do it under. And if I go, well, I said that's not training, that's control. Now, sometimes we have to control our children, but that's not the job of Proverbs 22. Look at the verse. It doesn't say, control a child, and when he's old, he won't depart from it. How many of you have known families where the father just tried to control them, and the kid said, I can't wait till I'm 18. I can't wait till I'm 18, and I'm getting out of this house, and then they ignore everything he said. What's the failure there? Some parents don't even control their kids. That's even worse. But if all you did is control, then don't expect it to stick. What sticks? Train. Not control a child and he'll do the right thing when he's older. Train a child and he'll do the right thing when he's older. Because guess what? In his heart, he wants to do the right thing. He wants to serve God. He wants to treat people right. And so you don't have to be there to decide what he's doing under a different roof, because he wants to submit to God and he wants to do the right thing. Train their hearts. I heard one time about a little boy, I don't know if it was at Bible class or school, he was supposed to sit down, he wouldn't do it. Finally, he had to sit down, but as he did, he said, well, all right, but I'm still standing up on the inside. When you're dealing with your child and you can tell they're still standing up on the inside, nope, we're not done. In fact, another thing, I mentioned this a moment ago, don't just spank them and that's it. Let them give an apology and then let them get a hug. It's like, yep, I did the wrong thing. I got my spanking because Mama loves me, Daddy loves me. I told him I'm sorry and I got my hug and now we're good. And after that kind of discipline, what's the child's attitude that day? They're happy and they're pleasing. They're wanting to do good. Mistake number 8, failing to use rod and reproof. Just the rod. What does a kid learn? Kid walks by and Dad goes, what does he learn? Stay away from Dad. How about just reproof? So Bertina, that's my wife, she's at Walmart one time And she sees this kid, and he's been pitching a fit. He's in the buggy, and he's screaming at his mom. He's trying to kick her. He's telling her he hates her. He's yelling. And the mom, I'm assuming, had read some of those child psychology books or parenting magazine articles that apparently had suggested, explain to the child how you feel. So this kid's sitting there trying to kick her, saying, I hate you. And mom goes, it doesn't make mommy feel good when you say that. And again, the child doesn't go, oh, I am so sorry. He leans forward as far as he can and just yells in her face. Did she reprove him? Yeah, but there was nothing to back it up. What brings correction and wisdom? The rod and reproof. So here's something to think about. The value in the lecture when it's backed up. Show of hands, how many of you grew up in a home? I'm not saying that your parents were perfect. They weren't, and you weren't, and I aren't. But you grew up in a home where typically, when you misbehaved, you got a lecture and you got a spanking. All right, now those of you that raise your hand, how many times would you have been glad if they would have just skipped the lecture and get to the spanking? Yeah. Why? And for those of you, if you didn't grow up, why did you see that? So we all got, everybody raised their hands, got the lecture and the spanking, and there were a number of times when we would have been glad, just give me the spanking and let it go. Why? Why is that so? Now see, the lecture without a spanking, the kid can like ignore it. Why did we want to go ahead and get the spanking? You know why? The spanking's going to hurt back here. Where did the lecture hurt? Yeah, the lecture hurt in here. Oh, I know. What if your brother had done that to you? What if your brother had gone in there and purposely broke your toe? Oh, why would hey, it's like that's hurting. It's just give me the spanking, let it get over. That's what we're feeling. We need the lecture, and then it needs to be backed up. What does the scripture say? The rod and reproof bring wisdom. Also, there's this, anticipation. If you're going to get a shot and the doctor says, Scott, you need to get a shot. Okay. But if he goes, hate to tell you this, Scott, but I'm going to have to give you a shot. And it's going to hurt. You might want to hold on to something. I hate having to do this. It's like, it can be the same amount of needle pressure as the other time, but this one's a lot worse because of the anticipation of it. So it kind of turbo boosts it. Proverbs 29, the rod and reproof bring wisdom. A child who gets his own way brings shame to his mother. And like the prodigal son who apologized, give the apology. And when the prodigal son came back, he also got the hug. Have the apology, have the hug. Mistake number 9, assuming cultural norms. Too many parents think, well, they're 2. You know what it is, the terrible 2s. Kids pitching a fit, throwing things, won't obey. Well, they're 2, it'll pass. Teenagers, well, they're rebellious. After all, he is a teenager. He just sassed his mother. Well, he's a teen. Listen, it's kind of culturally common. I don't get the terrible 2 things. I love age 2. Age 2 is great. Do they misbehave sometimes, need some training? Yeah. But man, a child that's getting training and attention and love, it's just fun. 2 is wonderful, 3 is wonderful, 4 is wonderful. But culturally common, people expect the terrible 2s, rebellious teens. Let me tell you something. You know what's also common? Ungodly adults. Now, if you don't mind, my child is going to be an ungodly adult, then just expect him to be a terrible 2 and a rebellious teen, because the trajectory works pretty well to just keep going on into ungodly adults. Teenagers don't have to be rebellious. Josiah, his daddy was a wicked king, died when Josiah was 8 years old. And in the 8th year of his reign, what did Josiah do? He set his heart to serve God. He was 8 years old when daddy died. In the 8th year of his reign, he resolved to obey God. How old was he? He's a teenager. And he set his heart to serve God. Timothy, where does Paul say, don't let anybody despise your youth? That's written in the 60s, maybe around 63 or so. When did Paul pick up Timothy? In the late 40s. In the 60s, Timothy is still a youth. How old was Timothy when Paul picked him up? He was younger. He might have been a teenager. Teenagers don't have to be rebellious. All right, number 10, training them to disrespect instructions given calmly. Listen to this. Training them, the mistake of training them to disrespect instructions given calmly. This is a scenario where, in fact, there's an illustration I use, but a brother described it very succinctly in between classes. I'm going to relate what he said. And this goes back to an expression. One time I was doing a thing with a bunch of homeschool parents, and I asked, what's your best 3-word parenting advice? And my favorite answer that day was one of the parents said, first time obedience. And that's what we're talking about here. And one of the brothers in between was telling me about when they were raising their kids, they got that concept, we need to have first time obedience, so here's what they did. He said they went back and explained to the kids, this is how it's going to be done. Because if you go through this pattern, Jaden, put that down, or Jaden, it's time for dinner, or Jaden, clean up, or Jaden, it's time for bed. He's like, Jaden, do it. All right, in a minute. Jaden, okay. Jaden, over and over. Jaden, don't make me tell you again. Jaden, I mean it. Jaden, and you keep raising your voice. Don't make me tell you again. And the way the brother described it a few minutes ago, he said, if you're not doing first time obedience, you're saying it over and over, and mom's voice is getting louder and louder, and people are getting upset, and then finally he gets a whipping, and then finally he has to do it. So I said, why not just skip all that stuff in the middle? Just say it, and then they do it. Now, if you've let this cycle develop, is it going to change the very first time? Here's a situation, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but let's suppose a situation where a mom's gotten into a habit of yelling and screaming at him or her. I would suggest also, if you've gotten into a yelling and screaming habit, having it in the conversation and apologize to the child. If I was in this situation, I might say to my child, we'll make it Jared this time. Jared, do you like it when I yell or scream at you? And Jared, because I haven't trained him well enough yet to say, yes, sir, he goes, nuh-uh. And I say, well, I'm going to stop yelling and screaming at you. I'm going to make it a point to not yell and scream at you anymore. I might slip up sometime, but this is my aim and this is what I intend to do. I'm not going to yell and scream. And Jared thinks what? Cool. And then I explain to Jared, because in the future, I'm going to tell you just one time, and then you're to obey. If you don't obey, then you're going to get a spanking. Now, if I have trained Jared for 5 years not to obey until I'm yelling and screaming, do you think he's going to believe it? No, I've trained him the other way. But that night when I said, Jared, put the toys away and come over here to the table. All right, in a minute. What? Time for your spanking. What? And then you remind him. And in his mind, he might try, yeah, but you weren't yelling. You weren't screaming. Because he's gotten used to that code. I said, no, remember we talked about it. Not going to yell and scream anymore. And he gets a spanking. Apologize, get a hug. Next day, probably going to have to do it again. Next day, might have to do it again. But eventually, if I'm consistent, what's Jared going to figure out? Oh, before I didn't do it until after I got yelled at in the whooping. Now I realize, oh, she means it. He means it. And they obey. First time obedience. It's our choice. Do they never obey? They obey after you scream. They obey after you say it over and over and over. Or obey on the first time to calm instructions without yelling, nagging, badgering, etc. Mistake number 11. Fathers discouraging and provoking to wrath. Paul refers to this twice in Colossians. Fathers, provoke not your children that they be not discouraged. Fathers, provoke not your children to wrath. Some children grow up in a home, and you may have grown up in a home like this, and if so, I'm sorry. Some children grow up in a home where you don't get any attention from dad unless you're in trouble. It's criticism or nothing. If you worked really hard for your math test and you got a good grade, he doesn't care, he's not interested. If you were to mow the grass and you went out there and you mowed it really well and you did the weed eating, you did a really nice job and you hoped dad would notice, and he came home and he was just focused on whatever he wanted to do and he didn't say anything, you didn't hear anything about it. When you did right, nothing. But if you messed up, boom, you're in trouble. That's sad. Don't expect talents beyond their capacity. I'm impressed repeatedly by parents of children with disabilities. And so often, parents of children with disabilities do such a good job of loving that child, expecting the child to do what it can't do, but not expecting it to do what it can't do. It's a bad mistake to say, this child has a disability, I'm not going to expect anything of this child. No. Let me give you an illustration of that. So, man I used to study with, older man, told me about one time going to Thanksgiving dinner and extended family or friend of the family or somebody, there was somebody there he'd never met before. And it was a young man who was born without arms. He just had a short nub on each side. And he was just amazed because he said his mom fixed his plate and then put a spoon there for him. And he would maneuver the spoon underneath the bite, use his nub to flip the food into his mouth and catch it. And he said, there was a bigger mess at my plate than there was at his plate. And he said afterwards, you know, when you have snacks and stuff on Thanksgiving, like fudge or whatever, his mom would go by and just like put a snack on his shoulder. And when he got ready for it, he would pop it in. And he was just amazed. Now, let's think about that mom for a minute and how wise she was. What if she had expected her child to be a concert pianist? That wouldn't have been fair. Wouldn't have been wise, wouldn't have been fair. That's not going to happen. But what if she had just helicoptered him and fed him, spoon-fed him his entire life? And the poor guy can't feed himself and he's got to sit there or hook him up to a tube. You see the difference? She didn't expect what he couldn't do, but she had taught him and enabled him to do things that you and I can't do. So you'll see this with parents of handicapped and disabled children. They love those children. They care for those children. They realize what they can't do, but they also expect them to do what they can. Don't expect them to do what they can't. And don't have fluctuating boundaries based on your mood. You know, farmers, if some of you are farmers, you might have an electric fence around the cattle. They learn that. There's a barrier. They learn that. How would you like to be a cow in a field where the fence is moving all the time? The electric fence shows up here and there, it's just wandering around. You're looking, you never know where it's coming from. You stop to eat some clover, bam. Some people grow up in a house like that. One day dad's in a good mood, and what? You can sass mom and dad's laughing about it and he thinks it's funny. Another day you spill something and you're getting whacked. It's just an accident. Don't do that. A couple more and we're going to stop for today. And some of these other ones I'll click through them, and if you want to discuss them in the Q&A later this evening, we can. The mistake of all play and no work. Kids need to play. Jesus talked about children playing games. He used it in an illustration one time of like children in the marketplace. We wanted to play this, you didn't want to play that. We wanted to play that, you didn't want to do that either. But they also need to work. And especially virtual play. You know what? Technology has some wonderful, wonderful advances. I'm really impressed with Garrett's SUV. There's a lot of advances on that thing. But we're also missing something. Playing soccer on a device is not the same thing as playing soccer. Going fishing on a device is not the same thing as going fishing. Looking at women on a device is certainly not the same thing as finding a godly woman that you love and she loves her, and you give each other and make a covenant arrangement before God to be husband and wife. So many kids are just addicted now to, and so many girls find their identity by how, and guys too, by how many likes they can get. And they'll put up their profile picture, and if it didn't get enough likes, then they have to change it again and change again. Then they realize that the more skin they show, the more likely they'll get a like. The more glamour they throw in, the more likely they'll get a like. And they're just living for somebody to validate them online. Please teach your children to live real life. I'm not saying they can't play games and do some other things or use some electronics, but monitor that, be careful about that. And have boys learn to be boys and learn to do work, and have girls learn to be helpful and do work. Let them play too. Go to the ant, thou sluggard. Number 13, failing to parent with joy. You ever seen a home like this? There's rules. There's no joy. They sit down to eat. No elbows on the table. We're going to say the blessing. Pass the peas. Don't make your kids grow up in that home. Look at these verses about joy. Rejoice in the wife of your youth. The father of the righteous will greatly rejoice. He will have joy of him. Let your father and mother be glad. Let her rejoice who gave birth to you. A joyful heart makes a cheerful face. When the heart is sad, the spirit is broken. A cheerful heart has a continual feast. Better is a dish of vegetables where love is than fattened ox served with hatred. The worthy woman, the law of kindness is on her tongue. A joyful heart is good medicine. A crushed spirit dries up the bones. And even of the fruits of the spirit, one of them is joy. There's an exercise I've been doing for some years now with parents when we're in a group setting. And I'm going to wait and save that for when we are in a group setting, in fact. But it has, make sure that in your family, there's just, have fun with your kids. Enjoy your spouse. Enjoy your kids. And when there's boundaries and respect, and a respect for God, it'll all be better. Last one I want to do, and then I'm just going to click through the other ones, so in case you want to talk about them, we can in the Q&A. The last one I want to do for this morning is this. Mistaking taking them to church for bringing them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Years ago, I went to see a brother in the hospital that I didn't know. I was out of state from where I usually preach up in Pennsylvania. Because at the time I wasn't in Pennsylvania. Yeah, I guess I was in Pennsylvania. That's irrelevant. and went to visit him, and he was sharing with me something really sad. And he had 4 children, all roughly middle-aged, and not a single one was serving the Lord. All 4 had become unfaithful. And this is what he said. None of them are faithful, not a one. All 4 of them, became unfaithful. He said, I don't know what happened. We took them to church all those years. And in that sentence right there, I could see what happened. We're about to wind up. Focus on this. Do you see what he said? I don't know what happened. We took them to church all those years. Do you see what his expectation was? He thought, if I take them to church, they'll turn out right. That's not what the Bible says. Deuteronomy 6 didn't say, take them to church on Sunday and Bible class on Wednesday night. Please do that. But that's not what Deuteronomy 6 said. What did Deuteronomy 6 says? You teach your children. Teach them in the morning. Teach them at night. Teach them when you're walking in the way. You teach them. What does Proverbs 6 say? Fathers, bring up your children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. It didn't say, fathers, make sure that they're at Wednesday night Bible class. Please do that, but that's not going to suffice. That's not going to do it. If you're working at the ER and I come in with an emaciated, starved child, and you're like, what has happened to this child? And you're trying to give it medical attention. What happened? And I say, I don't know. I fed it Sunday dinner and Wednesday night supper all these years. Yeah, we know what happened there. Good, but that's not enough. Ephesians 6:4. Deuteronomy 6. Teach them diligent to your sons. Talk to them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. Here's the things we're not going to go over now, but we can discuss later. Don't go into defense mode when your children are wrong. When somebody lets you know that your children, that's not your enemy, that's your friend. Don't do that. Number 16, thinking if we don't allow this, they might rebel and leave the church. What good is being in the church if they aren't in the Lord? And things like clothing choices. Don't have your kids dress so much seductive clothes. Just look at a prison list, what they say not to wear when you go and visit the prison. That's often there's reasons why they know that that's not what needs to be seen. I will do this one here. Instead of dressing like this, we got too many people dressing like this. Don't be doing that. Don't have your kids doing that. Ignoring the effect of evil companions. Failing to train humility. This is huge. I've seen pride. Let me tell you something. Some sins don't grow well in a church or in a religious family. Like being a meth dealer doesn't. If I came in here today and said, by the way, I've got a meth lab, and if anybody wants some good crystal meth, I got some with me. The meeting is done. That's not going to be accepted. But you know what does get tolerated, or at least not noticed sometimes in churches and families? Pride. What was one of the main problems of the Pharisees? Pride. And if we are raising kids with a whole bunch of rules, but arrogance and pride and self-righteousness, we've missed it. The first of the 6-7 abominations was focusing on home income over home outcome. Huge mistake. Children need parents. Underestimating threats. A lot to say on that. We don't have time. And later, we will talk about this in the last lesson, lowering the bar from the firstborn to the baby and different temperaments. I need to stop. We're over time already, but you have been very, very patient, and I appreciate it. If you need to respond to the gospel invitation, won't you do so? And if you need to make some adjustments in your family, do so, and do it for the sake of your kids. And if they're old enough to have a conversation about it, say, you know, this is something we do need to do different. Let's start having first-time obedience. Have a discussion with the kids. Have them on board with it and understand this is what we're going to aim for. We've all made mistakes as parents. I've made more than my share. Let's be what our kids need us to be and have the joy in them. And then, you know what? It's a great thing to see them pass us up. And praise God for being the better father than we will ever be. Let's point our kids to their eternal Father. If you need to respond, won't you come as we stand and sing?